I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I believed in the ocean, in pressure systems and thermoclines, in sonar and silence, but not in spirits. Not until the day I descended into Deep Station Orpheus. My name's Alex Mercer. I'm a deep-sea systems engineer, ex-Navy. 39 years old, divorced, no kids, and, if I'm being honest, married to the ocean. I've spent most of the last decade underwater, crawling through steel corridors miles beneath the surface, patching leaks, running diagnostics, listening to nothing but the hum of machines and the slow beat of my own heart. I've seen panic, real panic. I've watched grown men break down in compression chambers. I've held the hand of a junior tech as her oxygen scrubber failed, watching the life drain from her eyes. I've been the guy who keeps breathing, keeps moving, keeps calm when everything else is falling apart. That's why they sent me. Deep Station Orpheus sits 6 miles below the surface at the bottom of a trench that barely has a name. No one lives there permanently, just rotating techs and scientists cycling in and out for short stints. But lately, something was wrong. Systems were failing. Communications were glitching. One crew member had left early. The other refused to speak. They needed someone to go in, run diagnostics, stabilize the station, and report back. 6 weeks, solo. Then extraction. Routine, standard, safe. Or so they said. I remember the descent, the way the light disappeared, swallowed in layers. I remember the cold creeping even through the reinforced suit. And I remember the silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just surround you, but presses into you. What I didn't remember, not until much later, was when exactly the silence stopped being empty and started listening. My arrival at the station was a blur of procedure and steel. The shuttle docked with a hiss, and the reinforced hatch opened to reveal the narrow, dimly lit corridors of Deep Station Orpheus. It was colder than I expected, not just physically, but emotionally sterile, like the walls themselves had long since stopped echoing human voices. I was greeted by Dr. Elin Sorensen, the mission lead. Tall, reserved, and unsmiling, she extended a gloved hand and said, "Welcome to Orpheus, Lieutenant Carter. We're glad to have someone with your background." I nodded, wheeling my gear behind me. The silence between us, as we walked deeper into the station, felt heavy, like we were already far beneath the ocean, even though we had just docked. The station's interior was utilitarian, filled with rows of exposed piping, flickering overhead lights, and bulkheads sealed like tomb doors. There was no attempt at comfort, no color, no sound, but the constant mechanical hum and the occasional creak of pressure shifting outside the hull. Every corner whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Dr. Sorensen gave me a quick tour. The control room, the sleeping quarters, the galley, though galley was generous. A microwave, a table bolted to the floor, and pre-packaged meals stacked like coffins. Then she led me to the observation deck. It was the only place in the station that felt alive. A wall of reinforced glass looked out into the abyss, pitch black, broken only by the occasional flicker of bioluminescent life drifting through the deep. It was beautiful in the most terrifying way. Infinite. Hungry. "There's no signal this deep," Sorensen said beside me. "No GPS, no real-time communication, only scheduled data bursts through the tether, once every 12 hours. If anything happens down here, No one topside will know until it's long over." I turned to her. Comforting. She didn't smile. "We're all down here chasing ghosts, Lieutenant. Just different kinds." That night, I unpacked my gear in silence. My quarters were barely big enough to stand in, let alone live in. I stared at the wall for a long time before sleeping, trying not to think about how many miles of crushing ocean sat above me. And somewhere, in that dark space just beyond the glass, something watched back. I woke up gasping. For a split second, I didn't know where I was. The ceiling above me felt too low, too close, like I was in a coffin sinking fast through black water. Then the low, rhythmic thrum of the station reminded me where I was. Deep Station Orpheus, 4 miles beneath the surface. No sunlight. No escape unless you had clearance and hours of decompression time. My watch said 3:17, station time. I'd barely slept. I rubbed my face and sat up, the thin mattress creaking under me. The station was quiet. Too quiet. Even the machinery, normally groaning like some slumbering mechanical beast, seemed subdued. Then I heard it. A faint tapping. Not the usual structural groans or pressure knocks. This was rhythmic, purposeful. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap. I froze, listening. It sounded like it was coming from the observation deck. I slid into my uniform, grabbed my flashlight, and made my way through the narrow corridor. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered as I passed, like they were holding their breath. The door to the observation deck was shut. No sound on the other side. I hesitated, then slowly opened it. Darkness. The thick glass wall revealed the same vast blackness as always, a complete absence of light, as if the universe ended just beyond the window. The interior was still. Nothing moved. No one was there. But when I stepped closer to the glass, my heart skipped. There were marks on it. Smears. Long, wet streaks on the inside of the glass, like something had pressed up against it. 5 long lines, almost like fingers, trailing downward. I blinked, reached out. The glass was cold, perfectly smooth. The streaks were already drying, crusting like salt water. And then I noticed something stranger. There was no moisture anywhere else in the room. No signs of a leak. No humidity in the air. And these smears, they were on the inside, not outside, where the water should be. I stood there for what felt like minutes, the hum of the station returning, low and steady like a heartbeat. Then I heard the tapping again. This time, it came from behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there. Just an empty corridor, and the growing certainty that I wasn't alone down here. Not really. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in the mess hall, nursing a lukewarm cup of rehydrated coffee, the taste bitter and metallic. Every sound, every shift in the pipes, every creak of the walls, felt amplified, like the station itself was listening, breathing. By morning, the others began to stir. There were 6 of us down here, not counting Dr. Halverson, the mission lead. We'd only been stationed at Orpheus for 3 days, but already the station felt like a coffin wrapped in steel and sunk into hell. Everyone walked a little slower, spoke a little softer. Eye contact was rare, and no one lingered alone in the halls. "I heard something last night," I told Sarah, the marine biologist. She was pouring algae samples into the lab centrifuge, pretending I didn't exist. She looked up, finally. Her eyes were red-rimmed, tired. "We all hear things down here." "No," I said. "I saw something too, in the observation deck. Finger marks, on the inside of the glass." She stopped moving. The hum of the centrifuge took over. "Don't joke about that," she said quietly. "I'm not joking." Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. "Dr. Halverson said this would happen. Micro-hallucinations. The pressure. The lack of sunlight. Just keep to your routine." "Sarah, there's nothing out there, Alex." Her voice cracked. "Just water, and 4 miles of crushing black." She left before I could say more. But I knew what I saw, and I wasn't the only one rattled. That night, Ian, the youngest of us, just out of grad school, refused to sleep in his room. He dragged his mattress into the common area and stayed up with every light on, eyes wide and bloodshot. "They were outside my room," he whispered to me when I asked. Tapping, whispering. "Who?" He didn't answer, just curled up tighter, facing the corner. By day 4, the entire crew had shifted. Conversations were short, sometimes hostile, eyes sunken. Nobody trusted anyone anymore. And Dr. Halverson? He stayed locked in his lab, muttering to himself over the intercom when we tried to check on him. Something about signals, about resonance. That's when I decided to access the internal logs. I used a maintenance override to get into the system during the night. Most of it was normal: maintenance schedules, atmospheric readings, food inventory. But then I found something strange. A private folder, encrypted and labeled Delirium Study, Active. It had been created months before our arrival, and inside, footage. Dozens of hours of video. Not just security footage, but recordings of previous crews, of people slowly losing their minds, of faces staring into the cameras, whispering things like, "It's speaking to me through the hull," or "There's something beneath us." And one clip, time-stamped 02:47 a.m., March 3rd, showed a man standing alone in the observation deck, same as I had. Only, in this clip, there was a figure outside the glass, humanoid, pale, blurred by the water pressure, but watching him. And then, the man smiled and walked calmly out of view. The final entry in his log read, "I finally understand. The silence is not empty, it's alive." I couldn't sleep. Again. I lay on my bunk with my eyes open, listening. Not for the station's normal groans and hums, but for something deeper, quieter. There it was, a faint clicking, like bone on glass, like something trying to speak through pressure. I sat up, heart pounding, and turned on the bunk light. The room was empty. Quiet again. Just like before. Just like always. I checked the hallway, still empty. But I didn't imagine it. I knew I didn't. The crew was unraveling faster than I expected. Ian had stopped eating. Sarah wouldn't leave the lab. And Malik, our engineer, had started talking about dreams. He cornered me near the oxygen filter system that morning. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale with sweat. "They're not dreams," he said. "They're memories." "Whose?" He swallowed hard. "Not mine." When I didn't respond, he leaned closer, almost whispering. "There's something ancient down here, something buried." I wanted to dismiss it, say he was stressed, that we all were, but I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen in the logs. Later that day, I went back to the private folder. Something new had appeared. A file named Orpheus, Signal, Trace, Voice, 47. Log. It wasn't video. It was audio. I hit play. At first, it was static, the kind you'd expect from deep-sea sonar. Long pulses, slow echoes. But then it shifted. A faint rhythm emerged. Not mechanical, not random, structured. I boosted the volume, and my blood ran cold. There was a voice, hidden deep in the layers of static, garbled, warped by distance and pressure, but unmistakable. It whispered, "You brought us back. We remember the flood. We remember drowning." I yanked the headphones off. My ears were ringing. My skin felt electric. What the hell was Project Orpheus really studying? Later that night, the station lost power again. Total blackout. Only emergency lights remained, painting the halls in red, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. We all gathered in the common room, silent and tense. Ian kept glancing at the glass walls like they were about to crack. Sarah clutched her tablet like a crucifix. Malik said nothing at all. Dr. Halverson never showed up. I volunteered to check the main control panel. Honestly, I needed to be alone, needed to clear my head. But the moment I stepped into the corridor, the lights flickered, and something moved at the end of the hall. A shadow. Too fast. Too tall. And when the light steadied, it was gone. I pressed on, heart pounding. At the control room, the terminal was still functional, just unresponsive, locked out from remote override. A message flashed across the main screen. Orpheus descends. Phase 2 initiated. Below that, a timer began to count down. 3 hours. Whatever Phase 2 was, it had already begun. I ran back to the others. The timer was still ticking in my mind. 3 hours to what? System shutdown? Implosion? Or something worse? When I told them about Phase 2, Malik just nodded like he already knew. Sarah's hands trembled around her tablet. Ian refused to look at any of us. That's when we heard it. A voice came through the station's intercom, distorted, but unmistakably human. Except, it wasn't any of us. "We waited in the dark," it said. "You were not the first to come. You will not be the last. The ocean remembers." The room fell into stunned silence. Ian broke first. He stood up and backed away like something was crawling up his spine. "I told you we shouldn't have come here," he muttered. "It's not a research station. It's a tomb." No one argued with him. I opened the maintenance terminal, tried accessing older logs, but most were encrypted. The few that weren't dated back over 60 years, older than Orpheus Station was supposed to exist. The logs spoke of an expedition, a deep dive beneath the trench floor, a structure found in the silt, a sealed chamber, and then radio silence. Whatever they found, it changed them. And now, we were in the same place. Malik pulled me aside. "There's something I need to show you," he whispered. We moved quickly through the lower corridor, down past the pressure labs, where thick moisture clung to the walls. Faint scratches lined the glass in long arcs, like something had been dragged through here. We reached the old submersible bay, long decommissioned, and Malik pried open a hatch behind a rusted panel. Inside was a small terminal still running on backup. He typed in a code. More video files. They were labeled Dive 1 through Dive 6. We watched the first. Grainy footage. Murky water. A dive team descending beyond protocol depths. In Dive 3, the camera's floodlight illuminated something unnatural. A smooth, black surface carved with patterns too symmetrical to be natural. Glyphs that pulsed faintly under the light. And in Dive 6, we saw them. Figures. Still. Pale. Floating in the dark. Eyes wide open. Mouths silently screaming. One drifted past the camera and moved. That was the final frame. "No one's supposed to know this exists," Malik said. "The chamber's under us. They drilled into it weeks ago." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. He looked at me, haunted. "Because I hear them when I sleep." Back in the control room, the countdown continued. 12:47. We needed to leave. But the main elevator had locked itself. Manual override was down. No way to surface unless we took the old emergency lift, the one near the chamber. Sarah insisted she could hack the station's core, reset the locks. Malik and I decided to head toward the sublevel to map a route out. Ian stayed behind with Sarah. As we made our way through the lower tunnels, the walls began to change. The metal was wet, almost soft to the touch, and parts of it pulsed. I thought I imagined it, until I saw condensation moving upward. Then the whispering started again, not from the intercom this time, from behind the walls. "Too deep," it said. "Too long beneath. Now you belong to us." Malik grabbed my arm. "We have to go back." But the corridor behind us had changed. The entrance was gone, replaced by a seamless wall of metal. We were sealed in. And just ahead, through the shadows, something moved. Not walking, not crawling, drifting. It didn't make sense. The hallway behind us had disappeared, like we had walked into a place that wanted us to stay. The light from our flashlights barely penetrated the dark anymore. It felt thicker, like the ocean itself had crept inside and made a home within the walls. Malik whispered something I almost didn't catch. "They're not dead." I turned to him. "What?" He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the far end of the corridor, and when I followed his gaze, I saw it too. A figure, tall, motionless. Its shape was human, but its head was slightly tilted, like it was listening. Malik stepped forward. I grabbed his arm, whispering, "Are you out of your mind?" He turned to me slowly, and for a moment, I didn't recognize him. His expression was vacant, lips murmuring something under his breath, like a prayer or a chant in a language that didn't belong in this world. The thing ahead stepped back, vanishing into the black. And just like that, Malik blinked and gasped, like he'd been held underwater and just broke the surface. "What just happened?" he asked. "You almost walked right to it." He shook his head. "I didn't. I don't remember moving." I didn't say anything. I just kept walking. The walls had changed again. They weren't metal anymore. They were stone, slick with algae. We were below the structure now, the one from the dive logs. And just ahead, we found it. The chamber. Massive. Carved directly into the rock. The walls spiraled upward like the inside of a conch shell, lined with those same pulsing glyphs. In the center was a platform surrounded by deep water, still and black. Floating above it, no visible support, was something I still struggle to describe. A shape, constantly shifting, like a tangle of wires and limbs and smoke. And inside it, faintly, we saw faces. Dozens of them, screaming in silence. They weren't dead. They weren't alive. They were remembered. I turned to Malik, but he wasn't beside me anymore. He was walking toward the platform. I shouted his name. He didn't stop. His feet moved like they weren't his, like the ocean had reached up into his spine and rewired him. I ran after him, tackling him just before he stepped onto the edge. He screamed, a horrible strangled sound, and writhed like something was trying to pull him in. And then the light from our flashlights flickered and died. Pitch black. Nothing but Malik's gasps and my pounding heart. And then the whisper returned. But this time it was right behind me. "One more," it breathed. "One more for the sea." When the light came back, it wasn't from my flashlight. It came from the water. A faint glow pulsed beneath the platform, spreading outward like bioluminescent veins. Malik lay still beside me, breathing shallow, eyes fluttering like he was dreaming, or drowning inside his own head. I dragged him back, inch by inch, away from the platform. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I didn't stop until we were clear of the chamber. I didn't look back. The hallway that had disappeared earlier was back now, but different. The metal was warped, like it had been underwater for centuries. Rust, barnacles, and kelp waved gently in a current that didn't exist. We needed to get back to Orpheus. Malik was awake now, but quiet. He wouldn't talk. He just walked beside me, his eyes still distant. The deeper we went, the more the walls creaked. Not with pressure, with presence. Something was moving through the station, just beyond sight. Sometimes I thought I saw it in the reflections on the broken glass or oily puddles on the floor. Something tall, something with too many limbs. And always the whispering, "It remembers." I had to get to the comms. I didn't know if Orpheus still had power, but if I could reach the surface again, if I could get just one message out. We finally reached the upper level. Everything was flickering, screens showing old footage of crew members staring blankly at the camera, mouths moving without sound. The whole station felt like a memory loop, playing its own death on repeat. I slammed the comms terminal awake, its interface sputtering to life. Deep Station Orpheus. Surface link offline. Local broadcast channel only. Damn it, I hissed. Local only. Still, I keyed in a distress code. Anything. If anyone was still listening on any frequency, I had to try. That's when the static began. But this wasn't random noise. It had a rhythm. Tap, tap, screech, tap, pause, repeat, Morse code. I played it back 3 times before I understood. It's in him. I turned to Malik. He was standing perfectly still, eyes wide, mouth twitching like he was trying to scream but couldn't. The lights dimmed, and from the shadows behind him, it rose, tall, shifting, humming with that same awful remembering. I didn't think. I grabbed the emergency flare from the panel and fired. Light exploded through the room, burning through the dark, and the thing recoiled, just for a second. Long enough for me to tackle Malik and drag him into the emergency stairwell. We fell through 3 levels before landing in cold water. Somewhere deep in the lower decks, the sea had already taken over. And I knew now, the only way out was down. There had to be a launch pod, an emergency sub. If I could get him in it, if I could override the sequence before the thing found us again, maybe we could make it. But something told me it was already too late for Malik. The ocean had remembered him, and it never lets go. Water lapped at my thighs as we stumbled into the lower level. The emergency stairwell had collapsed behind us. No way back. Faint lights blinked overhead, casting a sickly green hue on the flooded corridor. The water wasn't just cold. It moved, like it was breathing. Malik was quieter now. Too quiet. I kept glancing at him, watching his face for any sign of it, whatever the entity was, whatever had touched him down there in the sanctum. We're close, I said, trying to convince myself more than him. The launch bay should be through this level. He didn't answer, just nodded. The water was waist-high now. Every step felt like dragging my legs through wet cement. Overhead, pipes groaned and rattled. The whole structure was shifting under pressure. Or worse, under something moving. We reached the launch bay door. A rusted security panel blinked red. Locked. Biometric access required. I cursed. Come on. There's got to be a way. Malik stepped forward without a word. The panel scanned his hand and turned green. Access granted. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Beyond it, the launch bay was partially submerged, but intact. A single emergency escape pod floated in its dock, lights still blinking. Hope. Real, tangible hope. And that's when I heard it. A voice. Not mine. Not Malik's. He doesn't belong to you anymore. I turned. Malik's eyes had gone black. Not metaphorically, literally. No whites. No pupils. Just endless void, staring through me. His lips moved, but the voice wasn't his. You opened the sanctum. You broke the seal. Now you carry what we buried. I backed toward the pod. I didn't ask for any of this. But you listened. You remembered. And so, we remember you. Behind Malik, the water rippled unnaturally, rising, forming something tall, multi-limbed, and wrong. The thing from before, fully formed now. Malik stepped aside as if presenting me to it. I didn't think. I lunged for the pod, slamming the emergency override. The hatch hissed open, and I dove inside, hitting the launch controls. Malik reached out, but stopped, like something held him back. Or maybe he held himself back. Our eyes locked for one final second, and then the pod launched. Pressure slammed against my chest as I was jettisoned upward through the escape tube, water rushing past in a violent spiral. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the thing in the chamber below, its face pressed to the glass, smiling. If you could call that a smile. I woke to blinding light and the hiss of oxygen. The escape pod had surfaced, barely. I was lying on my side, drenched, shivering, lungs burning like I'd swallowed salt water and fire. Through the condensation-fogged glass dome above, I saw only gray skies and the endless churn of the sea. I'd made it out, but I didn't feel saved. The pod rocked violently, jostled by waves that seemed too large for this latitude. I tried the emergency radio. Static. Tried again. Station Orpheus. Critical failure. Requesting immediate. The transmission died. The horizon was empty. Just water and sky, like the world had been erased. No ship. No plane. No land. Just me. I don't know how long I drifted. Hours. Maybe days. Long enough to feel myself unraveling. Long enough for dreams to crawl into my waking hours. I saw Malik's face in the reflection of the dome. I heard the whisper again. You carry what we buried. But I was awake. Wasn't I? On the third day, a research vessel finally spotted my pod. The Resolute, an American survey ship out of Kodiak. They hauled me aboard, gave me dry clothes, hot food, and questions I couldn't answer without sounding insane. What happened down there? The ship's doctor asked. Collapse, I lied. Structural failure. We lost containment. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. They let me make one call. I chose my sister. I told her I was alive. Told her I'd explain everything later. I haven't spoken to her since. Back on land, the questions only got worse. NOAA, Navy, private contractors I'd never heard of. Everyone wanted to know what went wrong with Orpheus. I told them bits and pieces, not the whole story. Who would believe me? I kept the rest buried, like the sanctum had been. But I could feel something inside me now, watching, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I hear water moving, when there is none. Sometimes, I dream of that face pressed to the glass. Sometimes, I wonder if I ever really left. It's been 6 months since Orpheus. I live in a small apartment now, far from the ocean. No more sonar scans, no more emergency drills, no more crushing black silence pressing on the hull. I got a job doing routine data analysis for a civilian research group. Safe, simple, boring. I should feel free, but I don't. Because something followed me. It started small. Wet footprints on dry tile. Salt crust forming on my bedroom window. The scent of brine lingering in my closet. I blamed stress, trauma. I told myself it was all in my head, until the night I heard the scraping. I woke at 2:11 a.m. Sharp. Same time. Every time. The noise came from beneath the floorboards, like something dragging nails across concrete. I froze, heart pounding, every instinct screaming not to move. But curiosity, it's a curse. I pried up the panel the next morning, found nothing, except water. Fresh water, pooling between joists. Cold as death. The next night, it got worse. I heard whispering again. That same phrase, warped and distant, like spoken through fathoms. You carry what we buried. I don't know what it is. The sanctum? The entity? Whatever had grown inside Malik. But I can feel it in me. Not just in dreams, but waking. It stirs when I hear running water. It pulls when I stand near the coast. Like gravity. I've started recording everything. Writing logs again, like we did in the station. At first it was for sanity. Now, it's evidence. Because I'm not the only one. Last week, a message came from an old Orpheus technician, one I'd never met. She found me through anonymous forums, said she'd worked on earlier deep-sea listening posts that went dark. She wrote 3 words before going silent. It's still growing. And now I can't sleep, because when I close my eyes, I'm back in the cold. I see the spires, the glass, the faces pressed to the other side, watching, waiting. They said the mind plays tricks when it's under stress, that after extreme trauma, the brain bends reality to protect itself. Maybe that was true. Maybe I should have held on to that comforting lie a little longer. Because the alternative? The alternative was that I hadn't left Orpheus behind. It started small, a ripple in a glass of water on my nightstand. Then the hum, that low, droning thrum of distant machinery, echoing from beneath my apartment floorboards. I told myself it was construction. I told myself a lot of things. But when I woke up one night to find seawater pooling beneath my bed, briny, ice-cold, and impossible, I stopped telling myself anything. I called Dr. Patel the next morning. She'd been assigned to my case after the debriefing, one of the few psychologists cleared to handle post-classified trauma. She always listened, always nodded like she understood, even when I described the thing I saw in the glass during that last dive. This time she just frowned. "Adam," she said, "do you remember what we talked about last week? About projection?" "I'm not projecting," I said. "I'm leaking." She blinked, clearly unsettled. "Leaking?" I hesitated. "It's not just in my dreams anymore. Orpheus. It's seeping into this world." That night, I set up cameras. Not cheap ones either. Full spectrum, motion sensing, audio capable. I kept them rolling while I slept. I told myself I needed proof. But deep down, I knew I was inviting it, daring it to show itself. It didn't disappoint. At 3:17 a.m., the footage caught my bedroom door creaking open on its own. A faint sound followed, wet footsteps across tile. And then, my voice. only I was dead asleep in bed. On the audio, the voice whispered, "Still sinking, Adam. You never came up." I watched the footage a dozen times. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't delete it either. A week passed. I stopped going outside. I unplugged my fridge because the hum reminded me of the coolant lines in Orpheus. I stopped answering calls. Then, the final straw. The mirror in my bathroom fogged up one morning, though I hadn't showered. And there, scrawled in the condensation, was a word I hadn't heard since the deep. Echo. That was the name of the anomaly. The designation Jackson used. Not a thing. Not a ghost. A signal. A memory that repeats, trapped in water, in pressure, in minds. Orpheus had been listening, recording, echoing us. And now, it was playing me back. I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, just away. But when I stepped outside, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't following me. It was everywhere. The world had changed, subtly, but deeply. Reflections in puddles lingered too long. Conversations looped. Strangers repeated sentences exactly as others had said them hours before. A woman at the bus stop asked me the same question 3 times in the same tone, same rhythm, like a recording glitch. The whole world had become an echo chamber, and maybe I was the stone that had broken the surface. You think you can leave the deep behind, that once the pressure lifts and the sunlight returns, you'll feel whole again. But pressure leaves scars. The bends don't just twist your body, they twist your mind. I drove for hours without a destination. Just me, a duffel bag, and the growing certainty that the ocean wasn't done with me. Something about the stillness of the open road reminded me of the abyss. The silence between breaths, the weight of anticipation. But the worst part? I wasn't alone in the car. Not physically. But in the rearview mirror, I sometimes caught glimpses of the red dive light, flickering behind me, even in broad daylight. Every time I blinked, it came a little closer. Eventually, I stopped at a motel near the coast, a nowhere town with peeling paint and sea mist that clung to your skin. The air smelled like rusted anchors and old grief. Room 6 overlooked the ocean. I didn't ask for that. The clerk just handed me the key and said, "You're the second one this month." I didn't ask what he meant. That night, I dreamed of the Orpheus submersible again. But this time, I wasn't inside it. I was watching it from above as it descended deeper and deeper, red lights blinking like a heartbeat, slower and slower. Inside, I saw myself, sitting calmly, eyes closed, and standing behind me was Jackson. Except it wasn't him. He had no face, just a reflection of mine. I woke up gasping, salt in my mouth. The window was open, and the ocean's roar filled the room. I stumbled to the mirror. My face looked pale, drawn, not entirely mine. And on the glass, just like before, was a message written in condensation. "You brought it up." I knew then, Orpheus wasn't a place. Not anymore. It was a state of mind, a signal, a frequency you could tune into if your trauma was deep enough, if your fear ran cold enough. It was leaking into the surface world not because of me, but through me. I was the carrier, and I had one choice left. I drove to the pier just before dawn, where fishing boats rocked gently under a lavender sky. No one else was around, just gulls and ghosts. I took the hard drive with all the Orpheus data, the videos, the anomaly recordings, Nora's confession, everything, and I threw it into the sea. The splash echoed like a depth charge. Then I stood there for a long time, letting the tide wash over my feet, cold and familiar. They say the ocean forgets, that it swallows everything in time, wrecks, cities, names. But not this. No, Orpheus remembers, and so do I. If you're reading this, if my story somehow reached you, know this: the ocean isn't haunted. We are. And sometimes, when we stare into the deep stares back. Adam Hartley.